And despite my designed to help military spouses reignite their careers. Toyota supports those who support our nation's heroes.
Welcome to the 10th Annual Women in the World Summit. At this time, please silence all electronic devices. Flash photography is not permitted in the theater. Thank you.
When I see young women, I see the glow. In their impact, how they act, what we do, and what we know, it's a kind of sheen that can't be seen in glass, diamond, or dewdrop, but the light of a wave of girls who refuse to be stopped. We don't need permission to make it our mission to make change, to be ourselves unapologetically confident, beautifully strange. We are that dawn of a billion beams, the radiant gleam, that stardust of a girl following her dreams. You can't steal this sparkle of mine. It only comes from a woman letting herself shine, it would appear. We are all here, focused, fierce, without fear, each a flame, dazzling and clear. Although some may doubt it, we show them. We write this poem, we dazzle, we delight, we dare, we fight, joyous, all the hustle in the spark. Join us, the wondrous warriors in the dark. Women in the world making change, we hear it and how our hearts hum it. Change, we feel it and how our dreams drum it. Change. Of women whose stories strum it to life in their impact. In fact, even with the whole world on our backs, we overcome it. Because women in the world don't run from it, we run it.
Each of us standing on one another's shoulders.
Each of us a summit. Together, today, at this summit, we don't just make change, we become it.
This is what church needs to be.
When you tell the story, it's hard for people to look the other way. Women can raise half the sky.
We have to have our country open to other people, not because they are good, but because we are good.
Many people think you might be a darn good candidate for national office.
This idea that behind a great man is a great woman. What about being in front of that person or next to them or standing on your own?
There shouldn't be an age limit for being aware.
If you don't like it, you don't have to eat at my table.
If you don't have the women, you don't have a business.
Oh, Nancy Pelosi, she thinks she knows more about having babies than the Pope. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We plant a flag about who we are as a country.
Not every woman who's sexual is a size 2.
To know that there's such fierce, determined, resilient women out there that are stopping at nothing, breaking down these barriers, it lights your soul on fire.
I know how powerful it is to have representation.
This is bliss. This is brain sex.
So, 10 years, where did it go? Weren't Sherry Silver and Amanda Gorman just fantastic with those dancers? Welcome to Women in the World, Year 10. What an amazing thing. I mean, I've come to think of this event as the love child of the Seneca Falls Convention and Coachella. In other words, burning woman, right? There are people here in this theatre who were there for our first fiery little summit in the Hudson Theatre, Midtown. I can't believe it. You're all there, many of you. So thank you, all of you, for joining us on this incredible journey since, including the mighty Oprah, who was with us in 2013 and is coming back tonight to close out our program. This year, as we planned our summit, we were moved to ask the existential question, can women save the world? We already know that a ripped Captain Marvel can protect us from our intergalactic enemies, and it's certainly great to have Brie Larson coming with us tonight. But look around. Down here on planet Earth, there are legions of everyday heroines who, though they may not have actual superpowers, display daily acts of fierce, preternatural courage. The biggest mistake we make is to think that women leaders are a handful of famous people. They aren't. They are the women all around us, fighting for peace, justice, and more dignified lives for others. Now, in every arena of life, it's time to see women as a unique source of strength, a competitive advantage, and the only deliverance from some of the overheated, crazy masculine mayhem out there. Even as we also celebrate the many men who are our champions and our allies. While it's thrilling to see the on-fire feminist movement surge ahead in the US, so many of our global sisters need our solidarity too. It is these women who live behind the lines of the news rather than in the headlines, who've always had a powerful voice at Women in the World. You will hear from many of them in the next 2 days. We're so grateful to our partners who make the whole summit possible, our long-time presenting sponsor, Toyota, our partner for 8 years. Special thanks to John Lisco of Saatchi & Saatchi, who's been with us all the way. And our leadership sponsors, thanks to them too, AARP, AT&T, Boston Consulting Group, MasterCard, Microsoft, P&G, and UBS. Big UBS group. As well as our supporting sponsors, AMC Network, PepsiCo, and Thomson Reuters. And our partner, Her Campus. Obeisance to you, all of you, and thank you so much. Now, let's begin with 4 impressive women who are working to save the planet.
My name is Greta Thunberg. I am 15 years old and I'm from Sweden. The year 2078, I will celebrate my 75th birthday. If I have children, maybe they will spend that day with me. Maybe they will ask me about you. Maybe they will ask why you didn't do anything, while there still was time to act. You say you love your children above all else, and yet you are stealing their future in front of their very eyes. You are not mature enough to tell it like it is. You say nothing in life is black or white. But that is a lie, a very dangerous lie. Either we prevent a 1.5 degree of warming or we don't. Either we choose to go on as a civilization or we don't. We have not come here to beg world leaders to care. We have run out of excuses and we are running out of time. We have come here to let you know that change is coming, whether you like it or not.
You should know that Greta Thunberg was invited to this stage, but not only at the age of 16 does she take her schoolwork seriously, she also takes environmentalism seriously. So she does not fly, and it would have taken her a very long time to get here by boat. Good evening, I'm Juju Chang. I'm with ABC News Nightline. And to my right, I have a distinguished panel. You know, last year we heard from scientists that we have 12 years, essentially, to avert irreversible and catastrophic warming of our climate. So Greta, in fact, is right. Change is coming, and the question is, what kind of change? Either we adapt our global economy, our consumption habits, and almost every aspect of our lives, or change will come to us in the form of extreme weather, food and water insecurity, global instability, and an uncertain future. That is, of course, the doom and gloom scenario, and we are joined by these 4 women whose focus primarily is quite literally saving the planet. Beside me are Christina Mittermeier. Born and raised in Mexico, Christina is a writer, a photographer, a storyteller, really, and a conservationist. Next to her is Christiana Figueres, and she's Costa Rican. You've gotten some hoops in the audience. Costa Rican by background, a citizen of the world. All of these women are. Former UN climate chief and architect of the Paris Accords, who led negotiations for the historic agreement. Beside her, you can clap, yes. I'm clapping on the inside. Beside her is Dr. Mae Jemison, an engineer, a doctor, an educator, more hoops and hollers, and was the first woman of color in space as a NASA astronaut. And next to Mae is Nina Lakhani, a journalist based in Mexico City who reports on environmental issues and its impacts on communities across the globe, but most especially indigenous communities across Central America. Welcome to you all, ladies. Christiana, I want to start with you. You recently spoke on a panel with Greta, and I know that the message from young people is often fear and panic. And so I want to get you to lay out for us the doom and gloom scenario, if you will. What happens if we miss the 1.5 Celsius global warming target that you tried to work to fight against? Because I know that for you, the big idea is to infuse relentless optimism to galvanize people to work.
So we actually only know that very recently. It's only since October of last year that the climate scientists have actually been able to get into the granularity of telling us what is the difference between a world that goes to 1.5 degree increased temperature and a world that goes to 2 degrees, which is basically the range that is established in the Paris Agreement. And without quoting 300 pages of science to you, here's the cheat sheet version. A 2-degree world, as compared to a 1.5 degree world, would mean 2 to 3 times as much biodiversity and natural ecosystem destruction, 2 to 3 times as much physical infrastructure and our basic physical needs destruction, and 2 to 3 times as many people exposed to life-threatening heat or hunger, i.e., a scenario that is completely impossible for us to accept at any understanding of morality or responsibility as adults. Simply unacceptable. That's why Greta is on the streets. Blessed outrage, right? Blessed outrage of Greta leading 1.5 million young people on March 15th out in the streets in 88 countries of the world and growing. And thank you for doing that, because they're telling us, we're doing our homework. You oldies, you have not done your homework. Get back to work and give us a future that we can actually aspire to. Now, here's the difficulty with that. The difficulty with that, and I'm in total admiration and respect of what Greta and all of those young people are doing, but it is up to us, the adults, to figure out what is step number 2 after that. Because if that outrage, which is absolutely necessary, and I hope we all feel the same outrage, if that outrage falls into cynicism and despair, we are literally fried. That outrage has to be folded and forged into a really stubborn optimism, which is living and working in the conviction that together we have everything that it takes to do the right thing. And not accept anyone who says, oh, well, I did as much as I could. That is not an answer. The answer is we together did everything that was necessary. And that is the only answer that we can give to our young people.
Persistent optimism, yes. Nina, let me get to you. You're a journalist. You live in Mexico City. 24 million people there struggling with the effects of climate in very dramatic ways. Tell me what you're seeing.
In a city so big, we have a huge stress on the water supply. Mexico City has to bring in its water from cities and areas around about the city just to supply us with our everyday needs. And you have a huge inequality in the impact of the water shortage, which I think we see all over the world. So you have the poorest neighborhoods in Mexico City, the poorest people having to buy water to bathe their children because they have, water twice a week coming into communal taps in their village, whereas you have the wealthiest areas with swimming pools and, plentiful water supply. But you have a real tension building up in a city where there just isn't enough water. There are too many people, and there are too many people because, a quarter of the population almost lives in Mexico City. Why? Because living in rural areas has become unsustainable. As a result of industrial farming, of free trade agreements that do not benefit small farmers. And now you have added to that climate change. You have unpredictable weathers, you have extreme weathers. And so people are forced to leave their communities, and people are forced to leave to leave what they've always done to come to cities where there are not enough resources for everybody. And I think just an important factor to add to that is that water has become, like lots of things like climate change, a political issue. You have politicians or officials coming in making very good plans but which require a 10, 20-year investment, and no politician wants to do that. You know, they're thinking about the political cycle 4 to 6 years,
Sure.
you know, and I think that makes it really difficult. And if I can just give one other example, I work a lot in Central America, in Honduras. Tegucigalpa is you'll have all have heard of Honduras for the migrant caravan that's been, you know, had a lot of press in the US these last couple of years. This is a country where a corrupt government has sold off all of its rivers, almost all of its rivers for so-called renewable energy projects. And yet I spend a lot of time in that country, and in the city, in Tegucigalpa, in the capital, in the dry season, we have 1 hour of water every 3 days. I'm not sure you can imagine what that's like to wake up every day and think, what am I going to do? Am I going to flush the toilet? Am I going to bathe with this much water? Am I going to wash clothes? You know, that's what it's like. That's the reality of a country which actually is rich in water. It has a lot of rivers, but climate change plus sort of corrupt policies and corrupt sort of, projects which do not benefit its own population are causing huge water shortages in the rest of the, for the vast majority, and that causes friction, it causes conflict, and it causes migration.
And we'll get to the climate refugee question in our next round, but I want to get to Christina. You're a marine biologist, but also a storyteller, a lyrical one at that, and one of the most important photos that you took, which was a story, a narrative in itself, brought a lot of attention to climate. It was designed to inspire people to change. Tell us about the polar bear photo.
Yeah, that was a that was a photo that I've been trying to make for a long time, because one of the problems with being a storyteller and trying to document climate change, it's like trying to document a slow-moving tsunami.
Sure.
You know, it's so difficult to capture in a single image that can jolt people into action. And for me, this photograph was an invitation to the world to imagine what the future is going to hold. And interestingly, you know, people embraced the story and made it their own. And they injected their own fears, their own frustrations, their own anxiety over climate change into this image, and it went viral. So it became controversial because, you know, in the internet, people appropriate the message and they turn it into whatever they want. And a lot of climate deniers use this image to further their side of the story.
And yet, what was your reaction, you know, on a gut level to capturing this image that moved so many?
I love animals. I mean, for me, being a photographer out in nature is the selfish pursuit of being in nature with animals. And seeing an animal suffer like this, it's a horrible experience. But I knew, because I photographed dead polar bears and other animals that have died of climate change, that just doesn't trigger an emotional reaction. And when we read that in the next 50 years we're going to lose polar bears as a species, that they might go extinct, you know, it's difficult for people to imagine what that looks like.
Right.
I wanted for people to know that this is not just a point in a data sheet. This is what a starving animal looks like.
These are not just high concepts. These are realities on the ground.
And starvation is a horrible way to die. For any animal, for any person.
For any human.
For a human. Yeah. And that is the extended metaphor for humanity. Dr. May, let me get to you. You're the only American, per se, on the panel. What do you think, how are we doing as a country? I mean, President Trump loudly withdrew from the Paris Accord. Into that breach came a lot of cities and mayors. You've given an eloquent TED Talk about radical leaps and innovations in technology. Give us a status report.
So I'm not sure I can go and get a full status report. I can say that we actually have incredible and sufficient amounts of technology, sufficient amounts of data, sufficient knowledge to know that we have to do something. And we are stymied from doing that, I believe, because we are not connected. We don't see ourselves as being involved. We think that we can wait it out, or that it just means something for someone else. So images like the polar bear makes us feel something. And in fact, I think a quote from Helen Keller sort of puts us best when we think about science. Science and technology, they're wonderful things. But she said, science has no remedy for the worst evil of them all, the apathy of humans. And it is as we apply the technology to make a difference. It's been since the night I went to college in the 1970s. We had solar panels up on the roof of the White House at the time. It was torn down in the belligerent ignorance of people not believing, right? People who are in policy-making positions, just belligerently ignorant and not believing or wanting to have the best for the rest of humanity, not connecting, is a problem. But what are some of the hope notes? So we have solar energy panels. Sometimes we think about what's going to be the really four-year degree person who's going to do something, or the graduate school engineer. There's these women in Mali, grandmothers, right? We have smart grandmothers who were taught and who build solar panels and electrify villages in Mali, near Timbuktu. So we have people who have very little who are doing amazing things. And here in this country, we're just getting around to really sort of going all out with alternative energy, with different forms of energy. We have lots of possibilities, from carbon capture to knowing that we can't continue to just use gas blowers or leaf blowers. There's so many things that we could do, but the issue is really around having an emotional connection and knowing that we have possibilities.
We were chatting backstage, and you said that a lot of it is science literacy and the importance of that in getting people involved.
And I think the science literacy helps us to understand, for example, that you can't keep doing something and then snatch it from the jaws of defeat at the last minute. Science literacy is a whole idea that someone can read an article in the newspaper about the environment, about climate, and understand that climate isn't the same as weather.
Sure.
Right? Those are the things we have to do.
I also want to have you all jump in on this idea that sometimes it's important to sort of change the framework of the question, that it's not that Earth needs humans or that we need to save the planet, because in fact the planet isn't technically dying. It doesn't need us, that it's humans that need the planet.
Yeah, can I go back to believing, the word believe? And I'm very grateful that you went to science literacy, because honestly, I really think that we have to do a search and replace for all those people who repeat that X person or whatever doesn't believe in climate change. I have news for you. Climate change is not a religion. It's not a myth. It's not a, ritualistic practice. It's science.
And the Earth doesn't care. Right?
Exactly. And, if you refuse to believe in science, then please refuse to believe in gravity and refuse to believe that the Earth is round, because it all actually is science.
And let me just add on to that. When people always talk about when astronauts are in space and you look back down at the Earth and you think that everything that is relevant in the universe is here on that planet. And I didn't have that feeling. I had the feeling that the Earth will be here. It doesn't really matter. We have to save ourselves. And it's really about really getting that understanding that this planet will be here. Space is not a plan B. I would go to Mars. I'd go to another star in a heartbeat. But for generations to come, we're going to be here. And science does require us, as you said, to believe in gravity, the Earth is round, and antibiotics, which everybody likes to use, right?
Yeah. And there's one more aspect to this. The Earth doesn't need humans, and humans may very well go extinct, if we really kill our life support system. But the last 100 years are going to be miserable. And I am afraid of that. Right. I don't want to be here for that type of...
And while the other thing, sorry, Juju, the other thing is that, as you said, it really is our connection to nature that nurtures our connection to ourselves and to the true meaning and the most important fundamental purpose of being here, right? So we cannot sacrifice. Yes, I was invited to the 4.5 billionth birthday party of the planet to remind me that, the planet has been here a while and will be here later. But it's only been in the past 6,000 years of those 4.5 billion that we've really had civilization as we know it today. And yet, it's a very, very short period.
Yes. And yet, while the planet is not dying, the planet as we know it, aspect of it is changing and dying. Tell us about what you're seeing underwater, because you have your nonprofit Sea Legacy, and ocean conservation is very important.
I think if a spaceship landed on Earth today and they looked down on us, they would say, oh, of course, this is an ocean planet, and all of these are ocean creatures. But we forget about that. And our oceans are quietly dying in complete obscurity. I was diving in Bahamas last week, expecting to find a living coral reef in marine protected areas, and you put your head underwater and it's all dead. It's dying quietly. There's no headlines. Nobody's talking about it. For me, the problem of climate change is not a problem of science. We know. It's a problem of communications. The fact that we have not invested enough in making sure that everybody is alarmed, engaged, activated, and participating in the solutions. We have them already.
And the ocean captures so much carbon and produces so much oxygen quietly.
You know, there's a whole movement of scientists that are reminding us that the best solution for climate change are the natural system that our planet already has. Living forests, living mangroves, living reefs, you know, all of these capture carbon, but they also, you know, prevent more carbon from being released. When they die, all that carbon goes into the atmosphere.
Nina, let me get you to talk about sort of, you've talked about how indigenous communities are, in fact, as Christiana pointed out, living closest to the earth. I read a statistic that in 2015, according to one UN estimate, if all things remain equal, 200 million people will become displaced by climate change. Tell me about what you're seeing in terms of the refugee crisis.
I think it's like a combination of factors that we're seeing, I think, and climate change is playing an increasingly sort of large part in that. Though people, the communities I work with, don't call it climate change. What they tell you is that, you know, for hundreds and hundreds of years, their ancestors, their families have lived in a very sustainable way. They've farmed, they've looked after the rivers, they've looked after sort of their environment, and they've lived, you know, good, sustainable lives, and all of a sudden that doesn't work anymore. You know, temperatures are higher. So, for example, in Central America, where coffee has been a real cash crop over the, you know, over many years, 70% of the coffee crop has been wiped out in the last 5 or 6 years, most probably because of a fungus, and that fungus actually is killed at a low temperature, and that we're just not getting to those temperatures anymore. So that's 70% of a coffee crop, you know, in a whole region. Rains are unpredictable, so people no longer know when to plant maize, when to plant their sort of basic grains. And if they don't know when to do that, or if the rains come unpredictable times, and there's droughts are more common, floods are more common, and you also have on top of that sort of cash crops, you know, like crops like African palms and sugar canes, which are being planted for biofuels, which are then exported to the West. You have a situation where people just don't have the ability or they don't have the resources to live off anymore, you know, and what that causes is migration, first of all, to cities, to like Mexico City, to Tegucigalpa, to these other cities, and then to the US. I mean, the World Bank itself predicts that in the next 30 years, 4 million people in Central America will be forced to leave Central America because of climate change. I think that's a huge underestimate.
Yeah.
You know, I think huge numbers of people that are coming to the US now are actually climate change and environmental destruction is a key part of that. Food insecurity is up there with violence, and they're very interconnected.
Christiana, do you see corporate partnerships changing the economic model so that it's not just doing good but doing well, that the profit incentive in coming up with solutions, do you see that as the future?
Yeah, I think, you know, everything that we have said is absolutely true, and it breaks our heart. And at the same time, in equal standing, let's see what is actually occurring, right? So to begin with, we have 1.3 billion people around the earth who still do not have electricity and hence are in abject poverty. Today, we have the technologies that we did not have 5 or 10 years ago to actually bring basic electricity to every single human being on this planet. What does that do? That elevates immediately that family, particularly women, because now they don't have to walk, I don't know how long, 2 or 3 hours to do all of the, you know, the food gathering and the cooking and all of that is so time consuming for those people. So we can do that with renewable energy because it is completely distributed. You can put a little solar panel on, technically, we still have to figure out how to finance it, but you can put a little solar panel on every single hut that does not have electricity. That is very good news. Secondly, we have moved from having 3% renewable energy, and renewable energy will cut down sizably on greenhouse gas emissions. We're already up to 23% of all of the electricity that is produced in the world. We're already at 23%, well on track to hit 50% by 2030. Absolutely very good news. And finally, finance and corporates, right? We have $8.5 trillion that have actually already, in the past 5 years, moved from being invested in the high carbon, over to clean technologies. 8.5 trillion. And with that, thousands of corporations that have understood this is where growth is. If they want to have any business continuity in the 21st century, they better be aware of profit, planet, and people. And if they do not have a triple bottom line, they have no space in the 21st century because our young people won't want to work for them to begin with.
So, May, let me just frame it for a second because we have about 5 minutes left, and I want to link gender and climate, right? Both, Nina, in terms of the people who are most affected and the people who are leading the voices for change. But go ahead, May.
I just want us to stop for a second and just deal with some truth, which has to do with lifestyle and what we assume. So in the lesser developed countries and places where people don't have a lot, we do owe them as a world to make sure that they do better. But we also have to deal with how much we extract from the planet. This whole idea of how much in continuing profit and enough is never enough does have implications. And we have to deal with our lifestyles. I live in Houston, Texas. It's always over air conditioned. It can be, 100 degrees. You go inside, you have to wear. Where do we start to deal with our lifestyle and our consumption, making sure we do things more efficiently and better? And we do have the technologies. Those incentives come not just from corporations making profits, but also the issues of regulation, which is really, I know we hate to say that word, but it is real, and it is something that we have to look at, and the technologies that are employed at any point in time have to be paid attention to.
We have about 4 minutes, which gives you each about a minute summary. But let me just give you Christiana's 5 tips that she gave recently, which are really adorable. And you can wax on that or keep going. 5 things that you can do. 1, eat less red meat. 2, examine your commute. 3, insulate. Don't air condition everybody. 3, invest your money. Think of where you do that. And 5, vote. Vote for the leaders who are speaking of faith. That's Christiana's thing. So, less than a minute, 45 seconds each. Nina, let me start with you. And think, too, about gender and climate.
I think in the communities that I work in, women and children are at the forefront of leading resistance against climate change, against environmentally destructive projects, because they're the ones that suffer the most. And that can be for all sorts of reasons. One of those reasons is because many of the menfolk in communities have migrated, often to the US. So they're at the forefront trying to protect their rivers, they're trying to protect their land in order to continue to have a sustainable lifestyle. I think we do have new technologies, but I think in the communities that I work in, what people would say is that these new projects and renewable energies come to their communities not for the benefit of them. They come and they produce energy to be exported to the US, to Canada, to produce biofuels that then go to Europe. And they do not have any benefits from that. And I agree with Dr. May, we as people in the West have to think about what we're prepared to sacrifice, that constant air conditioning, cheap fuel, all of these things, because all of these communities where there are mega dams, where there are solar panels, they still do not have electricity. They've lost their land and they've lost their rivers and they've lost their sustainable lifestyles without any benefit. And I think we have to take ownership of that, right? That for us to continue to have every electronic gadget that we want, that comes at a price. And actually, electricity and fuel cannot be worth more as a human right than water and food and life. And that is what is happening in the region that I work with.
Nina, thank you for that reminder. That was fantastic. Christina, can you help us sum up? We've got 2 minutes.
Yeah, I just want to remind us all that climate change is going to be the defining issue of our generation. And we cannot solve this problem if 50% of the population on this planet is disenfranchised to participate in the solutions. So speaking up and lifting other women is paramount. But this is also a problem of finances. In this country, we raise about $300 billion in philanthropy. About 30% goes to religion and then to education, the arts, humanities, blah, blah, blah. 3% goes to the environment. 3% to the oceans, climate change, wildlife, biodiversity. Think about how you align your values with your resources, because that's a huge part of the solution.
Money talks. Yes, May.
Just my reiteration is that we cannot survive without the earth. and the environment and the climate that we have now. We can't survive. We couldn't have survived at the Earth at the beginning. We're not going to be able to survive in the climate of the Earth a million years from now. We need to make sure that this climate stays one in which we can live and survive. What the role with women is we have to use our place at the table every day and make sure that we are creating the standards by which we judge success, and that we own up to that and not let anyone tell us that we have to make everybody feel okay. Some of this may be uncomfortable.
Appreciate that reminder, too. Christiana, bring us home.
You know, what is up for me after this delightful conversation is radical alignment. And what I mean by that is, how do we step up to this challenge? We need to understand what are the principles and values that are dear and deeply rooted in me as an individual, as a mother, as a daughter, as a hopeful grandmother, and take those values and principles to the outside world. You cannot address the global issues that we have in this 21st century by assuming that we can be one person at home and a different person at work, or one person at home and a different person as a political or as a corporate leader. Folks, we need to align our values and our principles. What I want for my two daughters, I want for every child, including the children that are being born in the Sahel right now and who I will never know. But we have to be able to understand that having reached planetary boundaries, there's no such thing as the zero-sum game anymore. There's no such thing as you win and I lose, or I lose and you win. From now on, either we all lose or we all win together. That's a very different century.
Thank you so much for that summation. Thank you. Ladies, I know that we all sleep better at night because of the work that you're doing. We are grateful to you, and I know this entire auditorium wants to lock arms with you and work to help save the planet. Thank you.
السلام عليكم. هذه لجين الهذلول توا واصلة إلى الرياض في طريقها إلى البيت سوق ومبسوطة. اليوم الأربعاء 23 أكتوبر 2013.
This is the camera that I filmed myself. It was actually in here. I was trying to hide it from the police. We're still in jail for saying very normal and very rationalized opinions.
And you don't want to be forgotten.
Who wants to be forgotten?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lina Al-Hazloul. Tonight, I want to tell you about my sister, Lujane. Lujane is our family therapist, or maybe our lawyer. From childhood to adulthood, Lujane has been the one my siblings and I turn to when we need help or advice. When I was 14 years old, I was desperate to take boxing lessons. At that time in Saudi Arabia, martial arts were typically practiced by boys and men. As open as my parents are, traditions are sometimes stronger than good sense. And my mom naturally refused to take me. I was upset. So I went to talk to my sister. Lujane marched downstairs to confront her mother. "Why isn't it acceptable for Lena to do boxing?" she asked, in a voice that is so distinctly my sister. Direct, confident, and a little intimidating. "Why are the rules like this?" she's always asking. "Who made them? Why can't they be changed?" Lujane wore my mother down with her questions, partly because my mother had no good answers. Who has ever had a good answer to the question, "Why can't a girl do that?" A few weeks later, I was ducking between the ropes of a boxing ring. But I never learned to fight like my sister. When Lujane fights, it's to stand up for people who don't have a voice. And because Lujane fights, she forges new paths for other Saudi women and girls. 5 years ago, when she was 24 years old, Lujane joined the many heroic activists who for decades have been fighting for Saudi women's right to drive. The following year, she was arrested for the first time for the crime of driving while female. Lujane spent 73 days in jail before being released. The experience was frightening, but my sister is brave. The arrest did not stop her from driving again. Undaunted, she moved to Dubai to pursue her master's. She worked hard at her studies. And then one day last spring, my sister was kidnapped off the streets of Dubai by government officials. She was forced into an airplane and flown back to Saudi Arabia against her will. Lujane was one of a dozen human rights activists imprisoned in Saudi Arabia last May. For months, she was held in a secret location without being charged with a crime. All over the Saudi media, my sister's name and photograph were published alongside a single word: traitor. Last June, Saudi women were finally granted the right to drive. It was a historic day for my country. Yet, Lujane and her fellow activists, who are the real reason Saudi women are now free to drive, they remained imprisoned. Last August, my parents were finally permitted to visit Lujane. They were shocked by what they saw. My sister could barely sit normally. She couldn't grip a pen, yet she smiled her dazzling smile and assured them she was okay. My sister was not okay. During a future visit, she broke down in tears and told my parents the truth. She had been tortured. These are the things my brave, resilient sister has endured while in prison. She has been beaten until her thighs were black with bruises, subjected to whippings and waterboarding, tormented with electric shocks, threatened with rape and murder. For the past month, Lujane and her fellow activists have faced trial in a Saudi criminal court of law. What are the crimes my sister has allegedly committed? Activism against Saudi Arabia's male guardianship laws, contact with foreign journalists, applying for a job at the United Nations. These are not crimes. They are the actions of a broad-minded humanitarian with moral courage. And yet, outrageously, this trial is still ongoing. As I stand here before you tonight, my sister remains locked in a prison cell. In the courtroom 2 weeks ago, Lujane handed my parents a letter addressed to me and my siblings. Alia, Yazid, Walid, Najd, Lina, she wrote. What would I be without you? Now, I ask the question, what would this world be without Lujain al-Hadloul? I'm not an activist. For a long time, I believed that staying silent was the best way to protect Lujain from further harm. But the injustices against her have only continued. I have no choice but to speak out and use my voice because my sister cannot. Tonight, I ask you to join me, speak up and fight for my sister, for all the Saudi activists who have been unjustly imprisoned and brutally tortured. Share their stories, tweet about them, write about them, talk about them. Our silence will not keep them safe. Thank you.
Gibney, you've just heard a very powerful appeal by Lina Al-Hadloul on behalf of her sister Lujain. I'm joined now by two Saudi women who are here to help shed light on the regime that imprisoned and tortured Lujain. Safa Al-Hamad and Manal Al-Sharif, thank you for being here. We're going to have a conversation, free-flowing. Manal, I'll start with you. You, like Lujain, had fought to get women the right to drive and also to call for an end to some of the guardianship laws in Saudi Arabia. Could you give us a sense, give the audience a sense of what day-to-day life is like for Saudi women?
It depends on which year. In 2002, when I left my family and found my job, I wasn't able to rent a house or a hotel room. I wasn't able even to get my identification papers without my father's permission. And still, I'm turning 40 this year, and I'm still a minor. By law, I'm minor. My son, my own son, when he turns 18, he will become my legal guardian. And that's I'm not kidding you, I'll kick his butt if he becomes my guardian. So it's 5 years for me to fight for the guardianship to end before my son becomes my own guardian. He's watching this, by the way. I love you, Aboudi. And so yes, women in my country living under male guardianship, and that means a man, from the time she's born to the time she dies, she needs a permission from a man. And it's usually one man assigned to her as a guardian. She can't even leave her country. My father, until this day, have to give me a permission when I want to leave the country. I'm just imagining if this guardianship falls, how many women will live in Saudi Arabia? We joke, we call it Kingdom of Men, and it will literally become Kingdom of Men when they lift the guardianship system and women can flee or leave freely Saudi Arabia.
Safa, you've made many important films both on Saudi Arabia and also about what Saudi Arabia is doing in Yemen. But give a sense of context to what Manal was just saying. I mean, conditions are rough for women, but set that in a broader context, both in terms of men and also in terms of the whole sort of government system.
Right. So, in my opinion, Saudi Arabia is a dictatorship. It's a theocracy.
And what's happening to women is also happening to men in the context of there are no rights for anyone. They do not believe in the rights of their citizens. And so part of the film that I did do on Saudi Arabia was about the uprising that started in 2011 that came along with all the other uprisings that were happening in the region. And part of the problem, and I think, of not understanding Saudi Arabia, and as part of the media, I'll take responsibility in that the media has been quite specific about what they're interested in and what context they want to see Saudi Arabia in. They want to see Saudi Arabia in the context of royalty. We only talk about the royal family. We talk about the kings and the princes and what they do and what they don't do. We rarely talk about Saudi Arabia as its people. And so when the protests started, one of the biggest challenges was to talk about the human rights situation in Saudi Arabia and not talk about it as in what the king is doing to other countries, or not talk about it as in Saudi Arabia still had a ban on women driving. And everybody was interested in, oh, let's do a film about the ban on women driving. To me, that was a problem not just for understanding Saudi Arabia, but for people from outside to actually understand Saudi Arabia as well. We have to push for more complex understanding of the endemic suffering of the people themselves structurally. The structure of Saudi Arabia as it is right now is oppressing everyone, top to bottom. The royal family to the people below them, to the people below them, women to their drivers, to their maids. And so we're all made to oppress anybody who's lesser than us. And if we don't understand it, not just in the context of gender, but also of class, because very rarely do people talk about Saudi Arabia in the concept of class. So when you're talking about even renting a house or getting a driver, who can afford a driver? Who can bring them in? Who can afford a maid? All of these things are not spoken about because there are so many stereotypes about how people from outside want to understand what's going on in Saudi Arabia. We were just having this talk in the backstage about MBS, right?
Right.
Mohammed bin Salman. I mean, he's become the person to talk about when you talk about Saudi Arabia. To me, that is a problem because we need to talk about Saudi Arabia as a country, as a government that has institutions, and we need to challenge and face the institutional issues. We're talking about the court cases. I mean, it's a joke to talk about the Ministry of Justice. It's a joke to talk about the women and the men who are being taken to court now and call it justice. And we have to question these things.
So forgive me, since you advised us all not to talk about MBS or
I'm not saying not talk about it.
No,
I'm saying talk about it, but within the concept.
No, I understand. I'm just saying, I'm gonna pivot to that for a second with Manal. Give us a sense. I mean, when MBS first appears on everyone's radar, he's the great reformer. That seemed to have disappeared rather quickly in the Saudi embassy in Istanbul.
He actually claimed that I never called myself a reformer.
Yeah.
He said the media called me a reformer. So he's not even self-proclaimed.
How did he get away with that?
We let him get away with that in the media.
Yes, we the media.
Yeah.
Yes.
To go back to Safa, I wanted to stay away from politics. And every time someone asks me about the politics, I'm like, it's so dangerous. I could lose my life because I go back and I have a family there. But unfortunately, after all these years of fighting, I knew it was all about changing the political system in Saudi Arabia. And because I'm living in a self-imposed exile today in Australia, I can't speak up more than the times I was allowed to go back to my country. I'm in a self-imposed exile because all my friends who fought with me are in jail today. And that made me realize it is the political system that's corrupt. Those people on top of the power are the people who need to be changed. We live in one of the last existing absolute monarchies in the world where people don't have a say. And as you said, it's a hierarchy of oppression. So the royal family oppress the men, and the men are giving the women to oppress because they don't even own their own life, the men. And now they're giving something to I'd say, vent that need for control, or at least to be heard.
But can I also add, they frighten the men to such an extent that they don't even know. The red lines right now in Saudi Arabia are not clear anymore.
Yes.
There used to be red lines. Like when Lujain first drove across the border, there were clear lines of what will and will not happen. Now, not only do they imprison you, they can disappear your family. They can put them under arrest, as in banned from traveling. So everybody, even those who are released, are not allowed to travel for years afterwards.
Oh, I've been hacked. All my accounts been hacked.
Yeah.
Whoever on Twitter, that's not me. And that's what's happening. They're hiring ex-intelligence from the US, and there was a New York Times piece about it. I work in information security. Surprise, I have a career. And in information security, I knew that the activists, I would teach the activists how to stay safe online, and when they tweet, and how to, I'd say, not hide their tracks, like take care of themselves when they are online. Now they're ready to pay up to $1 million to hack one activist phone. So now they went to that extent. A lot of Twitter accounts are ghost towns now. They're anonymous Twitter account. The people who were tweeting, who were critique of the government, they disappeared. It was forced disappearance. I'm on top of a case of Abdurrahman al-Sidhan. His sisters came out. I'm going to meet her in San Francisco. Her brother was disappeared in March 2018. No one ever heard of him. So not only they do this to your family if you're living inside Saudi Arabia, but they hunt you down, even when you're living outside.
I just wanted to get at, yes, in terms of what happens to you if you're a Saudi citizen and you're a critic of the Saudi regime when you're outside. This is what I wanted you to expand on that. Because
can we just stay for a second on the people who are still inside?
Yeah.
Yes. The fact of not only that they are disappeared, the families are even afraid to say that they've been arrested because everybody hopes, and this is what they do when they arrest you, it's like, oh, we're just going to have a conversation with you and we'll let you go in a few days. Yes. So your family is constantly in the hope, if they stay silent, as with the Hadloul family for quite a while, everybody is hoping if they don't say anything, if they don't criticize, if they don't tell human rights activists that my family member has been arrested. And this is why a lot of the women, when the arrest started happening, they didn't actually know who the other women were in a lot of the activist circles. And so they tell me, I was like, we don't know how many have been disappeared. We don't know the number because the families will not tell us and hope that they will be released. And obviously,
that's so true. So a lot of women, their names are not out there. And I knew just by coincidence, because the girls in jail, they saw them there, and the families are quiet. And my family, when I was in jail, they were being told to stay quiet, and that's for the best interest of your daughter. Thankfully, the world didn't stay quiet when I was there.
There's a lot of reports of torture trickling out of the country. Is there an intentionality to that? Is torture meant?
Torture them accidentally, you mean?
No. I mean, is it letting the news out instead of keeping it secret? Letting the news out as if to dissuade other people? Is it a device to really try to stifle dissent?
For the record, Mohammed bin Salman is not the one who started doing torture in prisons. I mean, if you look at any human rights report on Saudi Arabia going back decades, they have done this. The scary thing is the magnitude of it, and also the scale of how many women have been put in prison is unprecedented as well. I think torture in prison and letting people know that they're doing that, just like the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, is a message. So even if people are thinking about participating, even if they want to say something for their family members, you all in the back of your minds like, how much am I willing to pay for saying this? And I think this is quite a detrimental thing for most people inside Saudi Arabia. I know so many of my friends are now people who have managed to find some space in Saudi Arabia, and they're like, no, we will stay, we will do something, are now leaving the country.
Right, because the level of violence and repression has dramatically increased, would you say?
And also, I mean, in the past few days, more than 13 people have been disappeared, arrested. I say disappeared because they don't tell the families. So sometimes they just get taken and nobody knows about them, and everybody's like, is his cell phone working? Did he get the WhatsApp messages? So we're all trying to figure out who just decided, to detox digitally and shut off his phone, or that they've been taken.
The unofficial number now is 15,000 prisoners of conscience in 1 year. And worldwide, around 1,000 people last year applied for asylum. And I didn't apply for asylum, I'm a self-imposed exile. So there are a lot of Saudis choose not to go back. My mother is Libyan, and I grew up hearing the stories of my cousins who disappeared, or my cousins who left the country and never went back. I never believed like those stories. It looked like surreal to me that a country exists with such brutal leadership. Mom passed away, Now I'm living that exact thing that mom, growing up, mom was telling us. We're witnessing another Gaddafi. We're witnessing other half of Assad, where he's forcing his people either into disappearance or leaving the country. And that really scares me because he's young. I was so happy. And it's the same reason it made me happy. He was young. And it's the same reason it makes me concerned. He's young. And they live really long, up to 80 years. And that scares me. So we could witness a country until the oil loses its strategic importance. We are witnessing a country that the biggest two exports of that country are oil and terrorists. Men leave my country to join SS. Men leave my country to die. Women leave my country to live. That tells you a lot about my country.
We talked about, Safa, the false image of Mohammed bin Salman as a reformer. To what extent was the United States enormously complicit in pushing that image?
Well, for one, I was not optimistic.
Now I want to give flip my bear, the bird, 2 times. You may censor that. I'm sorry, it's live, I know.
I think the American-Saudi relation transcends both these men. I think the Americans have been complicit in many atrocities in the region and not just in Saudi Arabia. What is happening in Yemen is quite frightening. And so you mentioned Assad. I think Bashar al-Assad and Mohammed bin Salman have a lot in common when it comes to the privilege of being young and empowered does not make me encouraged. It makes me much more skeptical because these people have lived in palaces, have lived with privilege, and so their lens of what is reality is very different than ours. And so I knew that this was going to be a bigger problem than any of the older generations. And for both, that has come true. The other thing in parallel between the two is that now there is a rapprochement with Bashar al-Assad, and now everybody wants to bring him back into the fold of the world and keeping him in power, regardless of the war crimes that he committed against his own people. With Mohammed bin Salman, it's the same thing, right? So in the beginning, when Jamal Khashoggi was killed and everybody was withdrawing from going into Saudi Arabia, everybody now was business as usual back into with Saudi Arabia. Even with Congress, I doubt any of the resolutions that have come that are going to come to Trump's desk are going to actually translate to anything real and tangible and putting pressure on Saudi Arabia.
Well, Congress did act to defund.
They did, yeah.
The war
But
in
now
Yemen.
he's going to probably veto it.
Yes.
So let's see if he does or he doesn't. So I'm sorry, I'm not very optimistic about this White House and this administration.
No, I can understand why you wouldn't be.
Yeah.
In terms of the scale of the carnage in Yemen, give us just a brief sense of that. And also, one of the powerful things about one of your films was you documented the fact that U.S. was not just supplying guidance for weapon systems, but U.S. troops are actually on the ground in Yemen.
Right. The audacity of the United States when it comes to talking about stopping the atrocities in Yemen, when they are part and parcel of what's going on in Yemen. So even the resolution that was passed for stopping the Saudi coalition war on Yemen without talking about the America's forever war on terrorism in Yemen. And so the relationship and the war that was going on in Yemen is much older than even September 11. So USS Cole happened before September 11. And so they've been bombing the Yemeni people for a lot longer than they want to admit. And nobody within Congress and the Senate want to discuss the American counterterrorism program in Yemen. And so the drone strikes, which Obama is the one who increased and not Trump, Trump just basically increased the level of what is being done inside Yemen. So, for example, more troops on the ground, more boots on the ground, more special ops on the ground, more civilians killed, and less accurate intelligence that is going around now. What so the Americans are doing is that they're relying on the brilliant intelligence of the Saudis and the Emiratis, the UAE, who are involved or on the ground, to decide who is and who isn't a terrorist. Now, the Saudis and the Emiratis themselves can't decide on who is and who isn't a terrorist. So Muslim Brotherhood can be terrorists. They don't know the difference between Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And all of that is resulting in a lot more civilians killed. And nobody wants to talk about this.
Manal, you're trying to shed a light on what's going on in Saudi Arabia, particularly in terms of what's going on with women. You're flying out to San Francisco tomorrow.
Yes.
Tell me about what you're going to do out there and
yeah, can you show the hashtag? Thank you. It's actually I Drive for Freedom, number 4. With the Human Rights Foundation, I'm launching a campaign. In 2018, I was supposed to drive across the country with my son to celebrate lifting the ban, but I was not able to go. And Abudi, I'm here in America, you're listening, and I'm going to do the drive across the country here in the US. I'm going to stop by many states and cities that was part of the civil rights movement. I'm going to talk to American citizens to really shed the light about the women activists who are in jail today, who have been tortured. And it's really not war on women only, it is war on human rights in Saudi Arabia. I'm going to turn 40 on the 25th, and that's the day I will be exactly standing in DC before the Saudi embassy with a sign saying I'm turning 40 today and still my son is my guardian. So I'm going to be protesting that day there. You might follow it on I Drive for Freedom. And thank you. I wish I brought a gift with me, but I brought my keys. We say the key to change in my country for us as women activists was the key to drive our cars. Because it wasn't about driving a car, it was really about driving our own destiny. If you have a key with you in your bag, can I ask you, please, to take it out? I want you to make as much noise as you can to honor the work of all women in Saudi Arabia who are in jail today and all the women work for us to have our rights. Shukran. Thank you, everyone.
We'll see.
That's a yes or no question.
Yes.
What a different story!
No, this is the story that you get.
We can't all be nice girls.
And the Oscar goes to Brie Larson.
The superhero film starring Brie Larson shattered records in its opening weekend.
Higher, further, faster, baby. Heroes. Noble warrior heroes.
We need to be conscious of our bias and do our part to make sure that everyone is in the room.
Hi, I'm Radhika Jones. I'm the editor-in-chief of Vanity Fair. Thank you. And I am thrilled to be here with Academy Award-winning actress, director, and Marvel's newest and I think we can say best superhero. Just among us, among our small
Sure,
group.
I'll take it.
Brie Larson. It's great to be here with you, Brie.
Thank you. Great to be here with you and all of you. All of you. It's a lot of you. Thank you for supporting women.
You are coming off an incredibly successful movie, Captain Marvel. It's the first Marvel film led by a woman, and it just last week it passed $1 billion in global sales, which is amazing. And you know, I think think, although we say this, sometimes we say this and it's not true, but I think it has put to bed any doubt that a woman can lead a superhero movie. Let's hope, let's make that be the case. So I'm curious whether you felt that pressure to deliver. How does it feel to be on the other side of this incredible success?
I'm such an idiot. I didn't feel any pressure at all. I'm serious. I'm not making a joke. I think it's just, I knew going into it, I spent a lot of time thinking about it before I decided to take the role because I'm introverted, desperately introverted, and there's a cost to my job. And to do a film like that is a very big cost, and it means maybe losing things that were going to be important to me, like walking around Central Park. So I'm one of those people that really mulls it over, and then once I make my decision, I'm like all in. So I went all in with it. And I don't feel like pressure for me does anything. I don't think I need it. I don't think that it was going to help me make my mark. I just wanted to do what felt true, and the promise I made myself was that I was going to lead with my heart the whole way and not give up on what I believed needed to be on the screen. It wasn't until, the day before the movie came out that suddenly I was like sitting in my hotel room alone having a day off, and I was like, oh God, that thing everybody has said to me every day of, are you feeling the pressure? I'm feeling it now. And my team was like, it's too late. Like, it's all over, dude. Like, you should have thought of that on the press tour. I don't know, maybe when you were making it. And I realized that we put an unnecessary pressure on ourselves because I didn't feel the pressure because I understand film history, and I know that the film industry started with majority women. It started with women filmmakers. So this weird idea that women maybe can't open movies or are not important to storytelling or the female story is not high art is bogus. And I don't want to for a second buy into it. So I'm very grateful to have helped break this glass ceiling of, normalizing the concept that women can also make $1 billion, because I don't know why that was so hard to comprehend in the first place. It just seems like we're humans. Whatever. But, if people needed this to be another reminder in this decade, then great. I'm here. I did it.
So one of the things that I loved about the film, which I thank you, by the way, I got to take a little time off work to go see it.
Oh, good.
Is that Carol Danvers, the character you play who becomes Captain Marvel, her strength arrives partly in supernatural ways, but it also has to do with the strength she has as a kid of getting back up after a failure. Mm-hmm. And you see her over and over in flashbacks, like she gets knocked down and she gets back up again. And you've said about this movie, the very nature of this film means that I'm having conversations that I'd like to have about what it means to be a woman. So let's have that conversation.
Yeah.
What do we get from Captain Marvel about what womanhood is?
Ooh. Well, I think there's a lot of story in the movie, so I feel very careful about talking about specifics with it because society already tells us how we're supposed to think and feel and dress, and I am certainly not going to do that for you with a movie. So you can watch it and take for yourself as to what it is that you connect with. But I make films as my way of sending out a message in a bottle. It's my way and my introverted self in a really weird way that seems super extroverted, but it's actually an introverted way of me sharing myself and sharing what I think that human experience is. And I think a huge part in this era right now where we have women stepping forward and trying to fight to take the lead where they should have been already, there's fear. There's a lot of fear right now that if I fail, then it's on behalf of all women. And we are made because of our failures. I am sitting here today because I failed like 1 billion times. I had to audition multiple times a day. I was told no every single day. I was broke like 7 times. It's just how it goes. And the strength that I have and this commitment I have to myself is because of those failures. And so to be able to bring that to the screen was very important because I do feel like press tours in particular, moments like this can become mostly about the success that we've experienced. We sit up here and we're like, look at us, we're amazing. But we're here because of what didn't happen, not because of what happened. When good things happen, we just don't think about it. But when a bad thing happens, we have to sit with ourselves and think about why we're doing it in the first place and how to get better.
So now you have to forgive me because I'm going to ask you about success.
It's fine. I'm happy to talk about success.
You, as we saw in the video, you won an Oscar in 2016 for the role you played in Room. And, you know, your 2016 isn't that long ago. You're still very young, but you were very young then. It's such a pinnacle of achievement. And I wondered whether it affected your choices. Was it liberating to have achieved that recognition, or was it scary in any way, or was it just like another day at the office?
I had to get on a plane back to Vietnam, like directly after winning, and so I woke up in the middle of nowhere in Vietnam, like like literally looking out at nothing, and I was alone, and I had no Wi-Fi or cell service, and I was like, did that even happen? Was that even real? Did I just dream that? And then I had this sinking feeling that I was still myself, that I didn't feel any different. I didn't feel exceptional. I didn't feel like I was even a better actor. I just felt like I was going to be late for work. Like, it was so normal. And so when I got to work and was able to connect to our little Wi-Fi thing in one spot, I was able to text with Jen Lawrence, and I said, I feel the same. I'm scared. Is this okay? And she was like, dude, this is like getting your PhD. It's not that big of a deal. Doctors still make mistakes. It's not like once you get your PhD, you just cruise and never make a mistake ever again. This is how it goes. So take it as a pat on the back. You're basically got your diploma, which was exciting for me because I didn't go to college. And that was kind of it. And I found it to be freeing in a way to understand that hitting that thing, that sort of dangling carrot that's been in my industry and was something I watched as a kid, it didn't change me personally. It certainly helped my industry's understanding of who I am, but it didn't change how I felt about myself.
So,
cool.
One of the things that you've been doing in the industry now, in addition to your acting, is that you've been using your platform to speak out about a lack of diversity in film media. And this is something, as an editor, that I think a lot about. Obviously, it's my job I consider it my job to make sure that we are bringing a wide variety of voices to the work that we do, photographers. Every image that we make, every piece of writing, we need to represent a lot of different perspectives. But this is a new thing for you, and I just wondered how it came to your attention and whether you feel you're able to make some changes in that area.
Sure, and you've done an amazing job.
Oh, thank you. It's
been very exciting.
It's rewarding.
Yeah. I'm kind of a sit back and observe person. And I'm always thinking, and I'm usually trying to figure out why. I feel like an alien on the planet sometimes. I'm constantly why do we do this? Why do we all wait in line? What does this mean? And so, my mind wanders a lot, and I started noticing, because the press days are actually, for me, the time when I get to talk about the movie. I don't talk about it any other time. And I make things so that they can spark discussions. I don't make them so that people can be like, wow, look at your face. It's I don't care. I wish my face couldn't be on the screen. I do it because of the content and because I want to see what it stirs in you. And because my opportunity to do that is with the press, I started noticing that I was getting only a select groups of people. And I was curious what it would be like to have a more intersectional, diverse conversation. But I was curious if it was just my experience, because who knows what's happening behind the scenes, or if this was a larger thing. So I spoke with Stacy Smith at the USC Annenberg Inclusion Initiative, and she did a little study and was able to find that the numbers were kind of sad when it came to what kind of diversity was happening. And so we were able to get a little bit of a plan as to how we bring more seats up to the table. And it's important, I think, for me to state that no one's losing a chair. We're just adding more chairs. And that meant for me taking more time on my press days, adding more hours to my day to make sure all those voices were in, because I'm not trying to exclude anyone. The importance is to lift up more voices. And then it sort of spiraled from there, and I realized that there were so many other ways that I could do this, whether it was trying to reach parity with the female to male designers that I wore, making sure that I had people of color, behind the camera as well, doing photos for magazine shoots. It just sort of spiraled from there into this thing where it opened this new world for me, and I had such an incredible time on this press tour because of it.
It's great that you're feeling the impact of that, like that it's
good.
a real thing. I mean, it's we live in such a moment of change and disruption, particularly in Hollywood, and to hear that, you know, that through your work you're able to make that change is phenomenal. I want to ask you a little bit about how this all began. You were born in Sacramento, and the legend of Captain Brie is that
there's a legend.
When you were 6, you decided you wanted to be an actor.
Yeah.
Is that true?
That is true, yeah.
And now I want to say that my son is 4.5, and he wants to be an astronaut. But I am not moving to Houston. But you convinced your mother to move to Hollywood.
Yeah.
So what was that like?
It was the best. It was the best. I mean, being a kid is the best. And I don't know what my mom did behind the scenes because she was a single parent, but she made that single mom magic happen because I felt like I had her all to myself. It was just me, my mom, and my sister. She would take me to auditions all day. And I basically had, for the most part, uninterrupted time with her and my sister for like 10 years until, you know, she bought me a car. And I was like, okay, I get the hint. Like, you want your own radio. I understand. Like, you're tired of listening to No Doubt over and over again. So, and then I was sort of on my own. I mean, she was, of course, very involved. But I'm very grateful to her because it was a huge amount of dedication on a dream, you know, on just like a concept of something that is truly seemingly impossible.
And how is it that you knew that? I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up.
I don't know. I mean, I'm also the person that, like, don't take me to a restaurant with too long a menu because we'll never order. Like, I can't make a decision to save my life. But for some reason, like, the intuition of a child is quite pure. And so it makes me emotional when I think about the fact that there is this, like, 7-year-old inside of me that led me to this point in my life. And it's part of why I've been very careful about the film choices that I make, and they all have something to do with some sense of nostalgia or stirring or connecting with that inner child inside of us, because I feel like that's been the thing that's guided me my whole life.
And then you really came of age in the industry. So I think we have a picture of teen Brie. It's in the public record.
Yeah,
that's
about right.
We're going to spend the rest of our session talking about this picture.
Can you just keep that up for the rest of it? So
Yeah,
anything important I
great.
say, you just have that behind me?
Was it hard to navigate this industry as a teenager? It was such a vulnerable time, or did you kind of take it in stride?
I don't know any different, and I was homeschooled, so I'm not sure how it really compares to the, you know, junior high school experience. But for me, I felt like it actually became a positive in that I had to learn pretty quickly to choose myself. It didn't take me that long to figure out that it was sort of a ridiculous situation that I was placed in, where I was being asked to come in and basically read a dude's mind as to how I was supposed to dress and act to be his dream girl. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, if you want to tell me, maybe I have the clothes in my closet, but like, don't make me buy a jean miniskirt for you. You know, and it usually very quickly turned into what their idea was of confidence and not what my own idea of confidence was. And that's where I felt like there was always a discord. Like, you can't tell me how to dress and then expect me to act a certain way. We have to have a dialogue and a conversation. And it's also the beginning of where I started to make my own shorts and make my own things, because I needed to have an outlet that made me feel like I was in control and that I was exploring myself and having an understanding of what my experience was, rather than having people dictate it to me.
So were you surprised by the revelations of the Me Too movement, or did you see that coming?
Oh, I don't see anything coming. I was so grateful for the strength, and have continued to be grateful for that strength, because it has created this tidal wave of conversation that I don't feel like has stopped or will stop anytime soon. It, across industry, changed things, and it certainly changed my industry. We still, of course, have a long way to go, but it without a doubt is the reason why we have this historic shift, is because of the bravery of the men and women who came forward and spoke up about the abuse that they were experiencing.
One of the other things that has come out of that movement is a lot of conversation around pay, equity, and it's been part of the conversation around Captain Marvel that that your salary set a new precedent, which is fantastic. And I know that you're very vocal about advocating for yourself, and I wondered if you would talk a little bit about that. And also, you're not always the person at the negotiating table, obviously. You probably aren't. How do you make sure that your representatives are working with you and carrying your conviction to the table?
Well, I'm very curious, so I ask a lot of questions of my lawyer, and he says that I've always got a job working for him if the acting thing doesn't work out. You know, money is actually something I'm very excited to talk about here, and I'm excited to talk about in general because it's this thing that people think is super icky, and that's the trap. The trap is they make you feel icky about it so that you don't ask for what you deserve because you know what that number is inside. Yeah. And, you know, the thing that I want to bring up, and I'm not sure how this works in other industries, but maybe there's people out there in my industry as well, but the reason why I was able to get the quote that I have now, or the payment that I got for the movie, a lot of it had to do with the women that came before me. Lawyers use that as a comparison. They say, well, this person got this, so that this precedent has been set. So we've been playing kind of this game of Uno, which maybe that's a weird pun or metaphor to use, but I don't know. That's what I see in my head. We've been playing this, you know, everybody's sort of building it up, and I'm just the next step in that, and then we'll just keep going. So when women talk to me about this, I say, you know, don't even do it for you if that makes you feel weird right now. Do it for the women that are going to come after you. Do it for the next one. Do it for the future you, because you are helping. And if that can give you a little bit more of a stir in a fight, then do it. You know, we need you.
I think we have time for one more question, and it has to do with your new career. Not working for your lawyer, but you just, Netflix just premiered your first feature as a director.
Yes.
It's called Unicorn Store, and it's adorable. It's been called a love letter to everyone's inner child, which now, speaking to you, I understand even more how potent that is. And I just wondered, what was that like? That's a big first-time experience in an industry that you know well. What was it like to direct?
I loved it. I mean, it was the most fun I've had, and I'd had in so long on a set. I just felt joy. I mean, the film is quite joyful, so it was nice to take a break from the dramatic roles that I had been turning out for a couple years, because I don't know why. I'm a glutton for punishment, I guess. But it was wonderful. And once again, it was part of my courage in doing it was not necessarily that I was like, hey, everybody, like, you got to see what I can do. I was just like, we have to break these boundaries. And if I'm the one that's even the one directing a film as a female and it's bad, at least it's like, okay, that's over with. Who's next? Like, we just have to, I feel like if I have any sort of privilege, I immediately want to spend it. You know, whatever that currency is, I'm spending it immediately. I'm not going to hold on to it and hope that, you know, I put it in some account and it makes more money. I want to spend it because we need the change now. And I'm really not afraid of falling on my face because I've done it my whole life. So I'm just kind of like, bring it.
And directing Samuel L. Jackson, easy, hard?
It's super important, I think. And I will leave you with this because he's someone that certain directors have a hard time with because he'll come to set with a very specific point of view. And sometimes directors will come in and go, hey, can you maybe like try it more like this? And you will get a full TED Talk as to why you're wrong. And you'll realize that he spent months thinking about this character, thought about it every way through, and he's right. So when I directed him, I was like, you're right. Whatever you want is right. And just don't argue. Just know that he's right. And he is right. And so I moved forward from that being like, I want myself and more people to walk around going, I'm right. Just know that I'm right. Just trust that I'm right. I'm definitely right. If we had that, I feel like we would be moving a little bit quicker.
Thank you, Brie. I think I think Brie Larson can save the world. So we solved it. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
If we can't discriminate between serious arguments and propaganda, then we have problems.
Russian-linked information warfare exists today.
If it hadn't been for the social network platforms, it would have been almost impossible for the Brexit campaign and the Trump campaign to succeed.
Fake
fake, disgusting news.
It's a vast surveillance tool that has ended up in the hands of this company.
This brings the number of cases filed against Rappler to 11.
For me, it's about two things: abuse of power and weaponization of the law.
Viral rumors spread on WhatsApp that have killed people across the country.
Hi, everybody. Thanks. So this has already been amazing, and the speech by Lena was astonishing. We're dealing with the same issues in Silicon Valley because Silicon Valley is funded by Saudi Arabia and the murderous thugs of Saudi Arabia, and so it's really an important speech to give. But you guys are also on the front lines of very difficult situations, each in a different country and each for a different reason, but they all have a commonality, which is the abuses of social media, the weaponization of social media and communications, and really the amplification of hate across the globe using these tools, coupled with a group of people in Silicon Valley who are highly incompetent to the task of doing anything about it. And I think that's what we've seen. So that's setting the stage, and that's my nicest right now. So let's talk about each of you, what you've been doing. Barka, why don't we start with you?
So my name is Barka Dutt. I'm a journalist for 23 years now from India. And the point I want to make, Kara, is that it isn't just about the weaponization of social media as a vehicle of hate. It is the weaponization of social media against women. We have to understand that what we benignly call trolling is actually an instrument to silence independent, opinionated women.
Right.
It is to scare you away. It is to call you names that range from whore, slut, bitch on a daily basis. Let me give you a small example from my own life. A few months ago, there was a big terror attack that took place in the northern Indian state of Kashmir.
Right.
Right after that, innocent Kashmiri students started getting targeted by right-wing mobs. I went onto Twitter to say, this is not the right way to respond to a terror attack. India as a country should not be targeting innocent people. The moment I put that tweet out, within 48 hours, I received 1,000 WhatsApp messages, including nude pictures, penis pictures, threats to rape me, threats to shoot me, and abuses that I cannot even repeat here. I decided that I was going to name and shame my perpetrators, so I took each one of the dick pics and I put them on Twitter.
Yeah.
With the phone numbers of the guys who sent these
Uh-oh. Now you've gone too far, Barka.
Guess what Twitter did?
Oh, I know.
Guess what Twitter did?
I already know.
Twitter said I had violated the privacy of these men and locked me out. Now, is that not called being tone deaf? I tweeted Jack Dorsey, and I said, Jack, as he calls himself coolly, what do you have to say about this?
Yeah.
Jack said nothing.
Right.
Another woman would have buckled under this pressure. I decided they weren't going to silence me, so I'm still on Twitter, but I'm still fighting Twitter.
Right. Here's the deal. He's busy fasting. So, let's be clear. There are priorities here at stake. They threw you off because you put their phone numbers in. That's one of their...
And I showed their little penises to the world.
Right. So... Okay, penis. And you were called a prostitute, is that right? A prostitute.
Prostitute is a word that is used for women as a play on prostitute.
I got that. Okay.
Not that... And here's my problem.
Okay.
I don't like the fact that prostitute is used as a term of abuse, so that interferes with my politics. but I know it's meant as an abuse and it's used only against women. Right. And that is the other thing happening on these social media platforms. The nature of abuse against women is highly sexualized. They want to know, how many lovers you have. Are you married? Are you a whore? Do you smoke? Do you drink? I'm talking about the Indian context. I don't know how this plays out in other countries. Same? Right. And just the need to control us. It's driven by the need to control us. And if we do not look at it as an instrument of control, we are not getting the problem right.
That's absolutely right. And it's you use WhatsApp. Let's make this clear. WhatsApp is owned by Facebook. It is a closed system, communication system. It's one of the most popular in the world. And Facebook has, when they introduced it, allowed it to be very viral in terms of being able to do lots of messaging. It resulted in deaths in India, Myanmar, and stuff because people are using it as a viral tool to do that. They've since recently, when they realized this was happening, pulled back on those things. And yet it still is used as a tool. So that's WhatsApp. Maria.
Very similar. We're living in a war zone. It's information warfare, and it is meant to use hate, to incite hate, to stifle us from and questioning from the very beginning, and to actually, my gosh, I can't. This kind of astroturfing on social media, when you say it a million times, when you say a lie a million times, it is truth. It becomes a fact.
All right, so you are a journalist. Maria's worked for CNN and then started Rappler, which is a news website in the Philippines.
2012, we started it. It was supposed to build communities of action using technology. I drank the Kool-Aid. We started on Facebook. And so I actually know the best of what it can be, but it's certainly a month before Brexit, President Duterte was elected, and we saw social media weaponized in July of 2016, along with a brutal drug war, which the UN now estimates a death toll from July 2016 of about 27,000 people.
Which you reported on.
We also reported about the information operations, the weaponization of social media.
So talk about how it happens in the Philippines. Now, the Philippines, 97% of the news Facebook is the news purveyor.
97% of people on the internet are on Facebook, which means Facebook is our internet. It's free basics, right? And our company also was one of the ones highlighted for free basics.
Now, just so people don't know, free basics is the way that Facebook is trying to get their services around the world. And so they give away a lesser robust version of it in order to work on low data.
It's preloaded on your cell phone, but if you really want to read the article, you have to pay. And in our country, people will not pay. So it's very easy to manipulate them. This is information warfare. So this is AstroTurf. So you had a social media campaign machinery that helped then Mayor Duterte win. A month after, that machinery became weaponized. And what we saw is it not only attacks anyone who questions the extrajudicial killings in the drug war. And in July 2016, our reporters would come home every night with an average of 8 dead bodies a night, right? Then after that, when we reported on it, a 3-part series called The Propaganda War, way before Mark Zuckerberg was in Congress, this is mid-2016, then I was attacked. 90 hate messages per hour. It was a whole new weapon. And what do you do? I tried to make sure all of our data is correct. It makes you doubt yourself.
But what it led to was your arrest. How many times have you been arrested now?
Well, first, what it led to is all of the stuff that was astroturfed on social media came out of the President Duterte's mouth in his State of the Nation address about a year and a half later. So, you fertilize the ground by tearing down your credibility, like termites eating wood. And then after that, when the most powerful man in your country comes up with the same attack, it becomes truth again. And
we don't see that here at all, but go ahead.
They're of a type, right? Yeah. Well, and then after that, by January 2018, the government tried to shut Rappler down by revoking our articles of incorporation. In about 14 months, 11 cases have been filed against Rappler. I've posted bail 8 times. I've been arrested twice. The most recent one, I got off a plane coming from San Francisco the end of March. I walk off the plane. I get picked up. I'm pushed into a police van with 7 7 officers, four of them in full SWAT gear, and the others fully armed. And I kept thinking,
well, you are a scary figure.
I am. Gosh, and that just infuriated me. So for me, 2018 is all about anger management, and good God.
So what's happening is she's being persecuted, and it was really interesting. I wrote a column in the New York Times about Maria's, and I've had her on the podcast and stuff like that, talking about it. And in fact, a question mark about it in a podcast, the same thing. And what was fascinating is the attacks I started to get, which are really your attacks. And
if you tweet about me, you're going to get my trolls.
Likewise.
So heads up.
Right, okay. I'm going to do that tonight.
It's called sharing.
Yeah.
Right, okay. It's like a communicable disease, you know what I mean? Like, essentially.
No, but Kara, you really were attacked. I mean, when anyone tweets support, Christiana Manpur, the last time I got arrested, the first 7,000 tweets, 2,000, because she was the first to tweet support, targeted her. You were targeted.
Yes.
I thought you could handle yourself.
I handled myself.
Yeah, you did.
I'm really good with the fuck you tweets. Anyway, it worked fine. I don't mind at all. You know. I've got internet guys after me, so it's more fun because they're very easy to beat. So Carol, you started this whole thing and started to uncover how this happened. I want to talk a little bit about what you did, and then I want to understand what's going on now. What do you feel like is happening?
Well, I just feel a bit bereft because I'm not weaponizing dick pics, which is my ambition for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
But essentially, I started investigating this company called Cambridge Analytica back in November 2016. This all kicked off. And I've been kept going since then. But Cambridge Analytica is only one part of the puzzle that I've been looking at, and the tech platforms is another. But really, I've been looking at this sort of interconnected web of criminality and foreign interference that occurred in the Brexit vote. And the responsibility of the tech platforms, particularly of Facebook, in that is critical. And it is completely alarming to me that Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, has refused to come to Britain. He's been summoned multiple times now by our MPs and has refused to come and to answer our questions, even though we know that there are these terrible problems with this vote, which is going to affect the future of Britain forever. And we are trapped in this kind of nightmare right at the moment. And in Britain, people don't understand or can't this bigger picture of the way that technology is working and the way that it has enabled authoritarians all around the world. Is really not understood. We're so wrapped up in our own nightmare that is Brexit. That bit has been completely lost.
But it started there. It's the part of the same ecosystem of what's happening. Explain very briefly what happened with Cambridge Analytica. Facebook, I was at that famous, in 2008, I think it was, where Mark introduced this third-party data sharing. And at the time, I thought, this is a problem. If they're sharing data, are they doing it responsibly? Asked them, no problem, it's no big deal. And it was done in order to make Facebook massive, in order to make it a massive platform. It was done for economic reasons for Facebook to do it. Talk about what happened with Cambridge Analytica, which happens all over the place at Facebook.
Well, so what happened, actually, it was in December 2015, a reporter at The Guardian called Harry Davis reported upon this company called Cambridge Analytica in America. At the time, it was working for Ted Cruz.
Right.
And he had found out that it had harvested this massive amount of Facebook data, not from the individuals, but from a couple of 100,000 people took a quiz. And because they took that quiz on Facebook, Cambridge Analytica had got their hands on all of the data of all of their friends.
Right. You told two friends, it's what happened.
Exactly, without their permission.
Right.
And so we knew that back in 2015. And what has happened was that Facebook were just able to brush it off.
Right.
They were not held to account about it. And then what happened is that after the US election, a journalist in Switzerland wrote about Cambridge Analytica. I wrote about it, The Intercept wrote, and Facebook again could just brush it off. Because the whole thing with the tech platforms is that they just are not accountable.
Right.
And that was what we witnessed. And so when I discovered this ex-employee called Christopher Wiley, I found him in March 2017, I think. This was this amazing moment, because here was somebody who had been there, had overseen some of this harvesting, had the documents, had the receipts for it. And it was just, I realized that this thing of having somebody who could speak to it, who was a face of it, who was so incredibly articulate about what it meant and about the background of this company. It wasn't just a little data startup, it was a military contractor. It worked in Afghanistan, it worked in Iraq, and it was information warfare.
And Facebook's excuse was that we didn't know what they were doing, correct?
Facebook's excuse was essentially, but if you remember, it took them so when we published this time a year ago, Facebook went completely silent for about, but they didn't go completely silent. First of all, what happened was the day before, and bearing in mind this had taken us a year to get this far to publish it, we had had multiple legal threats from Cambridge Analytica, which we took really, really seriously inside the newspaper because it was owned by Robert Mercer, billionaire, and so the threat of being sued by a billionaire, we'd seen what happened to Gorka. We knew this was a sort of very real existential threat. But so we finally got there, and it was the day before publication, and we got this. I woke up to this legal letter from Facebook, and they were, we'd sent them all these questions a week earlier, and they were suddenly like, actually, if you publish this, we're going to sue you as well.
Right.
And at that point, we had these, emergency meetings with our lawyers.
Right. So what happened is it turned out to be true, so they couldn't really do that. And they immediately...
They could, exactly, but there was like this 3-day silence. There was this 3-day silence after we published when Facebook just went dead. And Mark Zuckerberg, it was like, where's Zuck? Where's Zuck? And people were standing outside the headquarters. And then eventually he came out and said, yeah, we're terribly sorry. And
well, that was the beginning.
It was a bad actor. They're
Right. That's the beginning of the I'm Sorry tour, 2017.
Yes.
We're now in the I'm Sorry tour, 2019.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is that the Guardian and Observer, the newspapers that I work for, we've never been included in that. We've never got the great Mark Zuckerberg, I'm so sorry. That has never happened.
Well, he's not sorry for you. No, I'm kidding. I want to talk about the accountability of the platforms. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say Cambridge Analytica unites us, right? Because the most number of compromised accounts in that Cambridge Analytica scandal was here in the United States. But the country with the second most number of compromised accounts was the Philippines.
Right.
And that also shows us part of how this is global.
How it's an absolute global issue. So let's talk about the accountability and the responsibility of these tech firms that own largely Facebook and Google because of YouTube, there was just a great story in Bloomberg this week about how they were trying to bring hate more virally with white nationalism. Talk about the accountability, Barca, and Twitter too, the accountability. In my estimation, they've had very little or don't seem to be able to wrap their arms around what they're doing and often hide behind ideas of a free and open platform. And the concept I have just is that they have built these cities, and they're digital cities, and I've said this a number of times, and they've decided to build these digital cities. They get all the rent on them, making them billionaires, but they've decided to have no police, no garbage men, no firemen, no justice system, no signs, and a whole lot of potholes. So it's like the purge every night. So talk about that.
So I think it's my experience that at least public pressure in India has pushed Facebook to take some action. And we're about a month away from a new government being elected. And this is really critical after what happened in the United States of America and the entire Russian sort of influence. So what Facebook has started doing is actually taking down a lot of accounts that are seen to be politically aligned. And this has happened after this kind of global pressure. So really it is what unites us. But what's interesting is, and we should talk about that, there's what's happening on the tech platforms, but it's enabled by populist politics. You cannot divorce the political environment from what these tech platforms are able to do or not do. So when Facebook finally starts reacting to public pressure and taking down, for example, advertisements that do not reveal themselves to be political advertisements or pages that are connected to the ruling party of India, you have a severe backlash against them. And there are other ways in which strongman-led governments can punish these tech firms. So I think we should also talk about the larger enabling political environment. The second point I want to make is we had Jack come on a Twitter tour.
Yes,
and,
I saw that.
And he came to India, and then 5 of us women, opinionated women, were rounded up to go and meet him. And you know how they want to put you in a box and put a ribbon on you, and if they can't put a ribbon on you, you're like problem people. So then they decided to take problem people for coffee with Jack.
Yeah.
And we all said, I said to Jack Dorsey, that do you have any idea how complicated it is to actually report an abusive tweet? Right? And the second point I have is when they tell us, all these platforms, why don't you just block the person? You're putting the onus for my safety on me, and you're letting the guy get away. To me, it's the equivalent of saying, when you go out at night at midnight, just make sure you don't go out alone and you don't wear a short skirt.
Right.
For me, block the guy is the same.
And also carry a gun. So
carry a gun, carry a pepper spray. Why don't you just block it and try? I mean, I don't know how many of you here have tried to report an abusive post. Right. It'll always come back saying, we found this did not violate our policy, whatever. And it's just extraordinary, the kind of organized, we have to underline this, abuse is politically organized. We have to recognize it is not random, it is targeted, and it is politically organized. There are armies of men out there to intimidate women.
So let me get to the point of why, and Maria, I want you to talk about your experience with Mark at Facebook. Why do you imagine that is? Now, I have a concept that most of the people who make these companies have never had an unsafe day in their life. One of them on Twitter, one of the top executives of Twitter got attacked about a year ago and said to me casually, it's really bad when you get attacked on Twitter. It's really bad. And I was, again, I started with fuck you. And I said, welcome to the world of people of color, women, gay people, anyone marginalized. And they're like, yeah, it's bad. And I was like, I was almost like taking the really expensive coffee and throwing it. So talk about that, Maria. Talk about your encounter with Mark, because you had a really unusual encounter with Mark, who by all, he's lovely as a person, right? Correct, very polite, listens. What happened? Explain what happened with you.
April 2017.
Okay.
Outside of F8, I had spent a year talking to maybe 50 different officials inside Facebook. We were partners.
Yeah.
And I gave it a year and finally got to Mark and I said, Mark, 97% of Filipinos on the internet are on Facebook. Facebook determines power in our country. And he frowned. And I had invited him to come visit Manila so he could see it, thinking that maybe he had never come. He hadn't. But when he was frowning, I was wondering why. And then he asked me, but Maria, what are the other 3% doing?
Yeah.
We did laugh. I mean, part of it is that, but you know my position on this, right? Right now, Rappler is a fact-checking partner of Facebook in the Philippines. And part of the reason we do that is because once we figure out the lie, we can find the network that spreads the lie. It goes down to, you've got to kill the terrorist networks. Yep. You've got to capture them, right? Yep. But the problem, of course, is will this be fast enough? How do you solve this problem right now? Because we can't just throw our hands up in the air. If we don't solve this, I don't want to go to prison, right? So medium, long-term education. Hopefully, they'll move faster, these tech platforms. This medium term is, everyone will say media literacy, but good God, we knew how to use Facebook before Facebook knew how to use Facebook in our country. And then finally, in the short term, unless we're waiting for government regulation, which frankly, some of the legislators don't understand the technology.
Frankly.
Yeah, I mean, right. So in the short term, the only people who can fix this, and please help put pressure, the only people who can help us right now at the front lines are the people inside the American social media platforms with supposedly American values.
Yeah. Okay. Carol, on the
just in case you missed the supposedly.
yeah, allegedly. Yeah. But do you know what? They serve really great fresh kombucha at all their headquarters. So
I will say they are doing something, but it's just so little, so late. We need to push them to do more.
And global cuisine for everybody at the place. So they do understand the international world. So, Carol, talk about the impact of Brexit. We're going to run a quick video from a new Netflix documentary about Brexit called The Great Hack. Is that right? Correct. Let's run it for a second. It's not funny. So talk about that. They do this a lot, these memes. Donald Trump tweets a lot of them.
But this
constantly.
isn't a troll.
Right.
This is a British political party.
Right.
Which, was registered with our electoral commission. This is political campaigning.
Right.
And the whole thing was really interesting and instructive for me, because I think that thing of feeling when you're online, when you're on Twitter, when you're on Facebook, that the idea that it's a public space, and then you realise when stuff like that is happening that it's not, it's a private space. And so if that had been posted in the street, the police would have taken it down. That's a crime. It's incitement of violence. It's the malicious communication. But there was nothing you can do because it's on social media platform. And so that experience of just really realising, the fakery of this public place, that it's a private American platform which is beyond the reach of our national laws. That was a kind of instructive moment. And also the other thing I found about it is, the thing I find about having this stuff directed at you, which is it's propaganda.
Yeah.
And it's propaganda which is specifically to undermine one's reporting.
Yes. Right. Yep.
And it's specifically undermining one's reporting by pointing out, but by preying upon being female.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that they have to use against me, essentially, is the fact that I'm a middle-aged woman. And that's the stick that they beat me around the head with, because it's all they've got. But propaganda, but the thing I was going to say is that actually what you think, it's not just online. You realise that it has an effect in the real world.
Right.
That it affects, decisions of editors and different things. That people do start to think, well, maybe she is a little bit crazy.
Right.
And it works. I mean, that is the thing about propaganda. It does work.
Right, because it's, as you said, repeated over and over again. As an enemy of the people, I find that it's really just EOP to my friends. It does, when something's repeated over and over again. Maria, we've talked about this a lot, because I think a lot of people in the Philippines now think you're a traitor. I got traitor.
CIA, every animal you can think of, treason. I mean, let's not give them ideas, okay?
Right.
But, I think definitely this is death by 1,000 cuts. But beyond the attacks on women, this is death by 1,000 cuts of democracy.
Right.
And we're seeing it.
Right. Yes.
It's happening in plain sight, and that is what makes me so crazy, because we feel the personal effects, but our societies will have this long-term. Excuse me.
And you just got what was in my
anger
heart.
Management.
I actually want to say we need to be a lot angrier, because.
But it will be used against us.
It will be used against us, but it's going to be used against us anyway, so we may as well go to battle.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And the point is, what I really worry about is brutalization and numbing. So what happens is, if every day of your life One person online threatens to rape you, calls you a bitch, calls you a whore, calls you a traitor. In India, the word is anti-national. Any dissent these days, there will be organized trolling. Any disagreement with dominant narrative will earn you the prefix of being an anti-national. Now, what happens is, as strong women, you say, we'll develop a thick skin. Now, there's a problem here. Because in the time that we're developing a thick skin, we're actually normalizing this behavior.
Right.
So I don't want to manage my anger. I want to be angry.
Right.
I want answers.
So what does that result in? Talk about what that results in. Then I want to get to solutions of how we do that. Myself, I formed the militia at the Ridge in San Francisco, and older people are going to get that. How do you begin to channel that? Because in some level, you're right. It does create, if you're the one screaming in a room about something, it doesn't have
because you have to realize we're fighting for you. And in my country, fear and apathy are the main things that's being manipulated by both sides. We, like India, have an elections coming up, right? And if you are angry, you will lose. So you must fight with a smile, and you must fight with purpose.
Go ahead, sorry.
Well, the thing, for me, I kind of reached a bit of a boiling point. I got radicalized by online content a couple of weeks ago, and that was the massacre that happened in New Zealand.
Yes.
And that day that it happened, and it was being streamed across the internet, those videos, thousands and thousands of them, racking up thousands and thousands of views, while YouTube and Facebook did nothing. And I was so outraged, and I was just outraged at my keyboard.
Right. Is that how you did it?
That's my outrage. Look, how dare you get it down? There's nothing you can do. But the thing is that there are things that we could have done there.
Yeah.
Those are crimes in Britain. Right. And we have offices of Facebook and Google in Britain. And our Home Secretary, who's in charge of our laws, was like, oh, this is really terrible. I hope they do better in the future. That was what his tweet was.
Right, exactly.
And it's like, no.
Well, how was it? It was 14 minutes into it before they moved on it, and then they weren't able to control.
But this proliferation, if they couldn't figure out which one, they should just stop the uploads. They should have stopped because that is harm which is happening. This thing about contagion, that content is radicalized thousands and thousands of people, and will now forever.
The attack in New Zealand was an attack, but it was by this murderous man, but it was an attack for, by, and facilitated by the internet. That was a critical part in the attack.
I think I kind of feel that event is a step change.
Right, in those countries, for sure.
In those, but because it is global, and because that's what we saw immediately with those videos, that they were being uploaded and shared and watched.
I'd like to think about solutions because, I feel like Jacinda's going to take care of it. I think they're going to pass some. Jacinda's taking care of it very quickly on guns and everything else. And they're going to shut it down.
A woman to step up.
Yes, I think they're going to do some very strong things. And in Britain last week, they had a proposal to really find them. And my feeling is once you start finding them, putting in place, and doing things like that, you can do that. Talk a little bit about solutions, because I just wrote a column that just went up on the New York Times saying we need to radically pass a privacy bill. We have to look at Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which gives them broad immunity, which is probably why they behave this way, and it was done at the dawn of the Internet age to create these behemoths. Talk about some solutions, because all of them are problematic in their own way. And Europe's gone the furthest.
Can I just add from New Zealand, right? I mean, we know for sure inciting to hate online leads to real-world violence.
Yes.
And New Zealand isn't just Pittsburgh. The email, the bombs that were sent, Cesar Sayok was a Filipino-American who was actually radicalized by the Internet. So we know that. Why do we keep doing this? All right, I'll throw it back to you for the solution.
I want you to give me I have some solutions. I think shutting them down immediately would be turn it off for part of it. For part of it.
I might ban political advertising on Facebook. Just ban it. It should be nowhere near an election. It is fundamentally anti-democratic what we are seeing.
All right, Maria.
I think it has to be far more transparent than where we are today, right? Micro-targeting in the way it's been used and the way inciting to hate. I think the gatekeeping powers, even the lies that are there keep spreading even after they've been buried, right? So what can you do? The first is tear down the terrorist networks, because all of this, so we haven't actually pulled it up to geopolitical power plays. We know this already. It is connected. The networks in the Philippines find their way to a connection with the Internet Research Agency. China is now helping the Philippine government with video surveillance. I always say Russia is B2C and China is B2B. Right. There is a reason why this is marching across globally.
Yeah. One of the interesting parts of that is when I did my interview with Mark, where I pressed him about the Philippines, trying to get him to feel badly.
Thank you.
It didn't work. It was an interesting discussion, the exchange where I asked him how he felt about the killings. And what he did, which was fascinating, which I think is an attitude adjustment for these people, is I said, how do you feel about the killings in Myanmar and India? And he said, you know, I'm all about solutions. Solutions are what I think about. And
it was an amazing interview.
It was.
I listened to it again last week.
Well,
and that moment of,
because
that you kept saying, yeah, but how do you feel?
How do you feel about how do you feel? And he kept saying, as an engineer, I'm a solutions-based. And I finally got to the end, I'm like, look, it's like the arsonist telling me he wants to build the house back again, but you're the arsonist to start with. Like, let's just keep that clear. And what was really interesting about it was the inability, when I kept saying, how do you feel about something you made led to death? I just want to know how you feel. And by the sixth time, he got frustrated because I kept at it. And he finally said, what do you want me to say? And I said, I would start with, I feel terrible that what I made and resulted in it. And then I talk about solutions. But it's the kind of concept that they're not responsible for it, which I think is really problematic. And there's the disassociation for what they made from the result of the consequences of what, except when they're talking about, you know, like Chewbacca Mom, isn't that fun? And Chewbacca Mom is fun.
But I would say the same. I would say the same as well. For it's not Myanmar, but what's happened in Britain is another example of that. Right. Because I can't bear this. Like, well, we're just going to try harder in the future. We've got all these solutions. We're rolling out X, Y, Z. And it's like, well, actually, we really need to know what happened in the past. Have any sense of stopping that? And they will not talk about.
Yeah, one of the lines I always use is that there's so little self-reflection in Silicon Valley. It's a mirror they can see. It's a miracle they can see in mirrors. So, talk about what solutions from your perspective.
I don't think it's realistic to say shut them down.
Right.
I think the answer has to come from all of us here. And that's why I go back to the point about being angry, because the only thing a business house, and these are all corporations, will respond to is consumer backlash, is the power or the voice of the people, is the power of the people on their platform. And I think the first thing to push for is to get the political manipulation of any of these platforms out. I think that's something we can agree on. And in India, I can give you this example that because it is election season, there is huge, ferocious sort of public pressure saying if this is an advertisement and there's a political party behind it, as a consumer, I need to know. I need to know. You need to be more transparent. And I think all we can realistically push for is transparency. WhatsApp is more problematic to me. For me, coming from a country where data is really cheap, where people have more, this is literally true, more mobile phones than there are toilets in India. And this is just a fact to digest.
Well, that seems right, but go ahead.
I promise you it's right.
No, I think it's right. I think it's a good idea, but go ahead.
But the point I'm trying to make is that even people who don't have access to basic infrastructure have access to data because it is that cheap, and they're consuming content on WhatsApp forwards. So what we've sort of, public pressure has done recently is made WhatsApp limit the number of forwards, right? So earlier what would happen is you would just have these random things going absolutely viral. So virality has to be contained. Now, all of these I know are piecemeal measures.
No, it's important, that one.
But bit by bit, and by basically, we, the people, have to set the community standards.
All right, so can I jump in there? Because it's all very well, I think, us, you in India and you in Philippines and me in Britain, but these are American companies which are based in America, and they don't listen to us. You are the only people who counts for them. Only you can hold them to
Carol, I'm trying, okay?
You are, Cara, you are. But Congress,
I'm like close to kicking them, so don't, No,
but
Congress, you're right.
But it's, sorry.
Look, so part of the problem, of course, is that in America, you still have law and order. You know, but when Mark when he was in front of Congress and he said it would take 5 years, I like threw a shoe, because 5 years means every day someone dies in the global south. Dies. And that is real. So to take from what you said, right, the political context, was it enabled by technology, this growth of populism and authoritarianism?
They're feeding off each other.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It was definitely like you threw fire onto a flame that was slowly moving starting in 2014 with Modi's election. But then beyond that, how can we solve that? And again, we want it done now. Let me defend Facebook now. I don't think we can throw the baby out with the bathwater, because in countries like ours, where institutions are weak, where endemic corruption is part of our lives, social media actually gave us an ability to work together.
And where mainstream media is not institutionally free. You have to understand this about our countries. We're a noisy democracy. At least India is a very noisy democracy. But even as a mainstream journalist, I have to admit that mainstream media is even more corporatized than these tech platforms are. So we come from a different cultural, political
We actually
context.
need it.
We need these social media platforms.
So that's part of the reason we please pressure.
Yes.
All right.
Keep going.
If you're running, two things. If you're Nancy Pelosi, I'm not going to say the other guy. What's his name? The guy who looks like a turtle. Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell. If you're Nancy, well, he does. Sorry, I shouldn't objectify people, but there you have it.
Reverse.
I don't care. If you were Nancy Pelosi, what would you do? Each of you, we've got one minute each of you. Or if you were Mark Zuckerberg, what would you? Or let's call you Marcia Zuckerberg, if you'd like. What would you? You like that, don't you? Someone actually said that to me, that there'd be more women being funded if there only was a Mark. This is a VC said this to me. Again, it's a miracle I'm not murderous. If there was only a Marcia Zuckerberg, there'd be more funding of women entrepreneurs. I know. Don't even. I think I got up and left. So talk about what you do if you were Mark Zuckerberg and if you were Nancy. What would you do, say, legislatively?
Oh, okay. If I were Mark Zuckerberg, I would get the politicians off my platform. This was a social network for people.
Right.
This was a social network to enable community contacts, you know, and new relationships, new equations, and not political advertising. I would ban it.
Nancy Pelosi, very quick, because you only got 2 more minutes.
Nancy Pelosi, tough one. I would push for legislation that makes platforms take accountability legally. I think this using free speech as an excuse for abuse and manipulation online, you know, this First Amendment or democracy as an excuse for abuse doesn't work for me.
Right. Okay. Next.
So it's not just one platform. Our information ecosystem has fundamentally changed.
Right. You're Mark Zuckerberg.
All of the data. I would think about it like post-World War II, after that time period. There is no council that actually looks at the internet, really. You put that data up, you have all of the terrorist networks, the information operations, the ones who conduct information warfare. Remember that it wasn't when they had the politicians go on it that these platforms went crazy. It was when they took news into instant articles, and within 6 months, we had Duterte, Brexit, a month later, the U.S. elections, the Catalonia elections. So I think we need like an Interpol to stop the impunity of the information operations. Put all their data up, have it be transparent, and hold these companies and governments accountable.
So like Space Force, but like Nerd Force, right? Okay.
Or like,
I like that.
What, post World War II, what did they create? The Marshall Plan, I mean, not even the Marshall Plan, NATO.
Yeah, so the Avengers with less punching, but I'll take the Avengers.
Brie, where is she?
I know, Brie. Go ahead, last you have 40 seconds.
I'm totally backing Nerd Force.
Right.
I think that sounds fantastic. I mean, if I was Mark Zuckerberg, if Marcia Zuckerberg, I mean, just like do the really, really basic thing here. So Britain is the first country that has tried to hold Facebook to account for what has happened in one of these elections, and it's just ignored us. And I think just start there. Start there. Because if you're not accountable to us, you know, long-time ally of America, advanced Western democracy, Anglophone, you know, same media, then there is no chance that Facebook is accountable to you in the Philippines. So that's just never going to happen. So
the guilt part is working.
Sorry?
Guilting them sometimes works.
Yeah, it does. Shaming is good too. But so go ahead.
Yes,
Finishing on
so I feel that is really, really important. That it's a signal that actually, are you accountable to anybody else in the world? You run this vast, vast global platform. You control all of the world's elections. They are all running through you, but there is no accountability. That, you know, show us that there is just a shred of accountability, and then we'll take it from there.
All right. On that note, thank you very much, you three.
I'm here fighting for women's rights and for women's equality.
It is not about the leader. The power of our democracy is in us.
Any little girl who's practicing her speech on the telly, you never know.
We have our voices, and we are not going anywhere.
Now let's go get it done.
Good evening. What's all this talk about women's rights? Little man in the back there say women ought not to have as much rights as men because women needs to be helped into carriages and over mud puddles. Well, I tell you, ain't nobody helped me into no carriages, and I ain't been helped over nary a mud puddle, and ain't I a woman? I done planted and plowed, gathered into barns and worked as much and ate as much as any man when I could get it, and no man could head me, and ain't I a woman? I done born 13 children and seen them all sold off into slavery, and when I cried out with a woman's grief, ain't nobody but Jesus heard me. And ain't I a woman? What I know is if one woman, Eve, was able to turn this world upside down all by herself, look like to me all these women's in this room together ought to be able to turn it right side up. Sojourner Truth delivered that speech at the 1851 Women's Rights Conference in Akron, Ohio. And little did she know that 168 years later, her words will still ring as clear as crystal, and I'd be delivering them to you, women in the world, at this magnificent gathering tonight. Ain't I a woman? But I tell you, the question that Tina Brown poses, can women save the world, got me thinking about Sojourner Truth and her message of common sense and empowerment. It also reminded me of a moment that I shared with Nelson Mandela in his living room several years ago. I had just told him that I wanted to build a school for girls in South Africa, and he asked, why only girls? And I said, because I am one. And because I understand what it's like to have been a poor girl wanting to do good in the world, but not having the means to do it. And that the future of the South African nation really depended upon finding leadership and partnership of great women. And I wanted to start the process by building promising young girls for the future so that they could lead South Africa as remarkable leaders. That is what I have done and what I continue to do. And I'm proud to say that these little pups, I call them little pups, come to us from 9 provinces all over South Africa, rural communities, townships. And every girl that has come to my school since 2007 has graduated and gone to college. Every single girl. With the goal of becoming a leader in her own life. Can she save the world? Well, I teach them first, save yourself. And then offer what you know to help save your family, and then your community, and then your world. I teach a class once a year to the graduating seniors, trying to cram everything that I wish somebody had told me before I graduated into a week. I call it Life 101. And my primary offering in that class is this. It is your job to make yourself whole. Not perfect, but whole and full. Your real work in life, your real work, is to fill yourself till your cup runneth over, so that you're never grasping and needy, clamoring and insecure. But you can live your life assured in your worthiness and your right to be here and to become the best version of yourself as a woman being. I teach them that there is no life without cultivating a spiritual life, because you are first and foremost a spiritual being having a human experience. And if you lose sight of that, it's easy to get lost in the world, and no one can save a world that they're lost in when they've lost sight of their own North Star. So having a spiritual life actually means actively and ritually creating the space in your life all the time for gratitude, for kindness, for empathy, for inspiration, for joy, and for reverence for life in the home of your soul first. And then working to spread that inner joy outward. It means slowing down. It means taking in the moment. It means being exactly where you are, not distracted somewhere else. It means knowing who you are and getting about the business of fulfilling why you really came to our planet. And also knowing that just being who you are, the reach of your arms, the span of your hips, the stride of your steps, the curl of your lips, as Maya Angelou used to say, makes you a phenomenal woman. That the arch in your back, the sun in your smile, the ride of your breasts, and the grace of your style. Nobody else has that like you. Because you and me, we in this room tonight are phenomenal women in the world. So Tina asked this question, can women save the world? And the answer is, we women people, we are used to saving other folk. We've been doing it a very long time. And we need to first and foremost honor the sacred time of saving ourselves, because that is where our greatest power lies. That's what Dorothy was trying to figure out running up and down that yellow brick road all that time. And when we fulfill the task of actually making ourselves whole, we're set up to fully express what we know, to now negotiate, differentiate, to placate, to facilitate, to demonstrate, and delegate. And on a really good day, it helps us carve out 20 minutes to actually meditate. And on a really, really good day, like the one we had last January, some of those very skills helped get 42 new women sworn into Congress. And I'm here to say, if I were a gambler, I sure would bet that those 42 new congresswomen have experience with issues that few congressmen have ever had to face. Let's see, let's start with, there's the profound and abiding lack of equitable pay, Ditto, the lack of affordable childcare. There's the distinct possibility of being sexually assaulted in college or raped on a date. There are the bosses who believe that the female anatomy is theirs for the grabbing. There's the shocking abuse of women serving in our military, and we could go on and be here all night. But if this sort of nonchalant brutality has wounded our spirit in any way, I'm here tonight to say that it has also galvanized our determination to live with greater depth, with greater tenacity and backbone. This diverse new generation of congresswomen has been forged by fire, and this is what I know for sure: we are all the better and the sharper for it. Stacey Abrams is quite simply a force of nature. Michelle Obama's extraordinary book, Becoming, is on track to be the best-selling memoir of all time. Marie Kondo is sparking new ways to think about home. Greta Gerwig's version of Little Women hits theaters this Christmas. And as of last week, Lori Lightfoot is the first African-American openly gay mayor of Chicago. Will you look at us, women in the world? So we protest and we persevere and we get knocked down. But to paraphrase a memorable moment on the floor of the Senate, still we persist. We prove ourselves again and again and again, and we maintain a healthy skepticism, but we refuse to become cynical. We cultivate optimism, but we are nobody's fool. We are diplomats. We are advocates, as you've seen here tonight. We are troubleshooters and problem solvers. And despite NASA not being able to come up with one extra spacesuit in a size medium, we are also astronauts. We believe in commerce. We believe in art. We do our damnedest to believe in ourselves, and we believe in justice for all, regardless of race, religion, sexual orientation, or checking account. And as hard as it is for some folks to fathom, the vast majority of us also believe we can determine the right reproductive choices for our own bodies. We are there for our aging parents. We're there for divorcing friends and scary teenagers. We're good listeners and we're badasses. And above all, we show up. We show up. Can women save the world? I'd say we've been doing exactly that, Tina, for so many years. Whatever the reason, women are givers of life, not masters of war. And conferences like this one actually inspire us to continue to do the work. So I want you to leave here today. I want you to pick a cause, any cause. For sure, we have plenty to choose from. There's gun violence and climate change and systemic racism. There's healthcare and media bias. The homeless need opportunity and the addicted need treatment. The dreamers need protection. The prison system needs reforming. The LGBTQ community needs acceptance. The social safety net needs mending, and a whole lot of women deserve, are entitled to more than 80 cents on the dollar. So clearly, women in the world, if we want to save the world, we have got to continue to rock the boat, to join forces, to scrap the rules, and then when the smoke clears and all the naysayers who say it couldn't be done settle down, we've got to reinvent this game. Because I don't have to tell any of you that the game was not built on a level playing field. But the good news is that this knowledge only reinforces our resolve. It also amplifies our humanity. And at this point, we actually need all the decency we can get. We live in a country that has somehow confused cruel with funny, serious with intelligent, attitude with belief, personal freedom with stockpiling assault weapons, and what is moral with what is legal. So it's time for women in the world to set the agenda. It's time for women to redefine the message. And we need to make that message a positive one. Let's make it ambitious and inclusive and brimming with hope, because you can't get what you want by focusing on what you don't want. This is about the need to establish as many meaningful connections as we can. If we're going to save the world, we have to find a way to connect to each other, to connect to the nature that we're killing, to animals, to history, to an acknowledgement of the lingering trauma of racism and sexism. We need to connect to the people we love and mean something to us, and more than that, to the people who don't. That doesn't mean we always have to agree with another person's philosophy. It means we, if we're going to continue to survive and thrive on this planet, have to find ways to transcend the politics of division and embrace the places that bond us, where we find our human ground. So fortunately, being woke to humanity, to fear, to pain, to need, happens to be one of the things that we women people specialize in. We don't build walls, we build bridges. And as Tina pointed out in her excellent Times op-ed piece, we have only to look at Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern's response to last month's massacre in Christchurch, New Zealand. I've never seen such leadership. The Prime Minister is a woman who has the courage of her convictions, and she set a global standard in leadership with her response. The answer, she said, lies in our humanity. We each hold the power in our words, in our actions, in our daily acts of kindness, she said. So women across the country then showed their solidarity by wearing headscarves to emulate the hijab that Ms. Ardern chose to mourn in. And the Arab community felt their benevolence. 50 murders that could have brought even more destruction instead led to a portrait of the Prime Minister displayed across Dubai's tallest building with the word peace shining above it, in English as well as in Arabic. Jacinda Ardern projected peace and goodness, and the Arab world projected it right back for all of us to take in. And suddenly we saw that the other didn't seem that much different from us. So here, women in the world, we have to make the choice every single day to channel our own inner Jacindas, to exemplify the truth and the respect and the grace that we actually wish for the world. We need to tell it, as we're doing at this conference. We need to write it. We need to sing it. We need to proclaim it. We need to be it. We need to be the truth. We have to be the respect. We have to be the fierceness, the love that we want to see. And when we do that, mark my words, a change is already coming.
Oh my God.
Hey, hey.
My God. My God.
Hey, hey.
That wasn't a speech. That was a feminism jam. That was I mean, we're also psyched backstage. We're virtually like dancing and singing. I mean, Oprah is the true woman in the world. She is in the world. She's engaged in the world. She's always been the best version of herself. You really inspire us. We just got Life 101 on steroids from Oprah tonight. It was so fantastic.
Thank you all.
I cannot thank you enough on behalf of all of us here. And, you know, Oprah's activism keeps on expanding. She's about to do a documentary with Prince Harry on mental health. and she has her new book out, The Path Made Clear, which she's giving us all as a gift tonight when you leave. Part of her, yeah. She listed all those bestsellers, and we know this is going to go zooming up there, Oprah. So I cannot thank you enough. And all these incredible, brave, courageous, fierce, fantastic, fabulous women who've been on our stage tonight. We're in awe of every single one of them.
It's incredible.
You know? And tomorrow we resume with the Women in the World Summit, and we are going to have the incredible Priyanka Chopra, the incredible Stacey Abrams, who's coming. Yes, you all know. So be with us tomorrow, and just go out now and think about Oprah 101 life. You're amazing.